Public Committee for the Humanities in Pennsylvania presents the Humanities Profiles of Children's Authors, part of the Profiles in Literature series featuring interviews with persons prominent in American literature for children. The moderator for this series is Dr. Jaqueline Shachter of Temple University. Today's special guest is Beverly Cleary.
From Carmel, California comes today's guest, Beverly Cleary. Welcome to the East Coast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Joining me in greeting you is my Temple University colleague, Philip Yanella, from the English and American Studies departments.
Pleasure to meet you, Beverly.
Thank you.
Representing the Free Library of Philadelphia is the head of children's book selection, Kit Breckenridge.
Thank you, and you're one of my very favorite authors.
Thank you.
Kit, children around the world agree with you. Here's proof. This 1977 photo taken in New Zealand. Who greeted you there?
I was greeted by the mayor of Invercargill, which is on the very southern tip of New Zealand. And several hundred children also came to greet me, all bearing paper butterflies because they had done their homework. I live near the famous butterfly trees where the monarch butterflies spend the winter.
Ah, that's fine. You've also been to Hawaii, as this photo shows.
Oh, yes. My husband and I are wearing leis made of orchid, plumeria, and carnations. The carnation leis were so heavy that I shared them with my husband.
Would you mind if I asked what your husband's career is? We know yours.
Oh, he's a retired accountant.
Did you go to New Zealand and Hawaii on vacation?
We went to Hawaii because I was brought over by friends of the library who wanted me to speak to children on 4 different islands. The trip to New Zealand was a vacation, but it was inspired by a remarkable children's librarian from Invercargill who had looked me up on a trip around the world.
Oh, and the home you leave for world traveling is this comfortable California rancher on the Monterey Peninsula. What major city is close?
San Francisco is about 130 miles to the north, and Los Angeles is 300 miles to the south.
Aha. Here's a good interior view of your home showing your daughter, Marianne, a cellist. Where does the open door lead?
That leads to my study, which is so small it's rather difficult to photograph. But here I am at my desk.
Marianne has a fraternal twin brother, Malcolm. They're mighty handsome young people. Tell us about the wall hanging behind them.
That's a needlepoint tapestry that I made that shows the lives of the Clearys. The apple tree is a tree that really is in our backyard, and I am shown pursuing a butterfly, which is a symbol of ideas.
It's poetic. We've had one glimpse of Malcolm. Now here's another as he runs in what meet?
That was the 1978 British Amateur Athletic Association meet in London.
Both of your twins are obviously talented, and I wonder, did they inspire your picture book, The Real Whole?
Yes, I wrote that when they were in nursery school.
Have they been in any of your other books, I suspect?
Yes, they were featured in Mitch and Amy.
Yeah, we might mention that Mitch and Amy, like all the other books mentioned on this program, are published by William Morrow and Company. What is Mitch and Amy's theme? Could you state it for us?
I think the theme is rivalry. There are several kinds of rivalry in the book, besides sibling rivalry.
Do you spread peanut butter on pine cones as bird feeders as the mother does in Mitch and Amy?
Indeed, I do, but I'm not as nearsighted as the twins' mother in the book.
You have a good deal to say in that book about reading difficulties. There's the instance where the children discover that a famous professor's son in the school has language difficulties and consequently becomes a bully in the school, takes his difficulties out on smaller children. Why do you emphasize the language difficulties? Could you talk about that for a minute?
Well, I think because I had such a terrible time learning to read when I was in the 1st grade, and because I suffered so being in the low reading circle with a group of little boys, very unhappy little boys.
You're a former children's librarian.
Yes.
Could you say why you made the turn to a children's writer?
Well, I was very fortunate in having a school librarian who read something that I had written and suggested that I should write for children when I grew up. I also had much encouragement from high school English teachers with their comments, very funny, and you show talent, those lovely comments that we cherish so.
Do you try to instruct through your books? Do you try to entertain or instruct, or are they?
I would like to think that perhaps I instruct some adults as to children's point of view. I do not try to instruct children. I feel strongly that children should be allowed to read freely and discover what it is they want or need to be instructed in.
Among your serious book statements, Ramona and her father tells how demoralizing it is to be unemployed, and both Ramona the Brave and Ramona the Pest about how important it is for a pupil to feel her teacher likes her. These are major ideas. Now let's consider the humorous incidents in your books. Phil first, and then Kit.
Oh, my goodness, there are so many. In Henry and Ribsy, I think of the boy finding it fitting to have his 2 canine teeth pulled and then by a dog, and then learning how to spit through his through his canine teeth. In Mitch and Amy, I think it's delightful when Amy writes. I have a daughter named Amy. I can think of her doing this. Amy writing or wishing to write to the president to have him abolish her nemesis, the multiplication tables. I just laughed and laughed over that.
I think I've gone back to Ramona the Pest more times than anybody you know. It's something that picks me up when I'm feeling low or blue, and the whole book is just funny and tender, and I guess to say a few of the incidents would be when Ramona very literally takes her teacher seriously when she says, "Sit here for the present." And Ramona is sure she's going to be the only one in class to get a gift. I really love that.
That's cute. And I remember her boinging the curls of Susan. I snickered at the half ping pong ball that serves as a crash helmet for the mouse riding a toy motorcycle. In your fantasy, the mouse and the motorcycle. In Henry and Ribsy, I could just picture 3 boys wearing sailor hats with turned-down brims after their mothers gave them horrible home haircuts. At least Henry wasn't the only one with chewed hair. Beverly, what's a particularly humorous incident in one of your books that you enjoyed writing?
I enjoy writing all my books, or I tear up what I'm writing and throw it away. I feel that if children are going to enjoy reading, the author should be able to write with zest. But I particularly enjoy a touch of satire aimed at adults, and I had great fun with the episode where the 2 girls bring home their school progress reports. And
that's in Ramona the Brave.
Yes, in Ramona the Brave. Beezus is a little smug about hers, and of course, Ramona resents any criticism from her teacher and explodes into the bad word.
You want to say what the bad word is?
Guts.
That's cute, and it's thematic. It's in keeping with the whole theme of that book. One of the, you may have some ideas about some humor, how she gets her humor.
I've often wondered how you get at the funny names that you give character. Mrs. Grumby is grumpy. There is Ribsy for a dog. Can you tell us how you go about naming characters? They've always struck me as very amusing when you do that.
Some names just spring forth. I don't know where they come from. Others I have to search for. I'm a great reader of telephone books in every city in which I spend the night. I read obituaries, any list of names when I'm searching for a name. And the name has to feel right for the character, or the character will not come alive.
One humorous name that's not imaginary is Klickitat Street. This photo shows it actually exists. In what city?
Yes, Klickitat Street is in Portland, Oregon, in the neighborhood in which I grew up.
There's also a photograph here of the school that you attended in Portland, which was the prototype, I believe, for Henry Huggins School called Glenwood. Is there anything unusual about the school that you attended?
I think there is. I visited Fernwood School 2 or 3 years ago, and I was astonished at how little the school and the neighborhood had changed since I lived there 50 years ago. I really feel it must be one of the most stable neighborhoods in the United States.
It's in the playground of Glenwood School that 4-year-old Ramona in Ramona and Beezus has a temper tantrum just as PTA dismisses. Ramona, sometimes clomping in her mother's high-heeled shoes, is a constant source of humor. Where did you get the idea for Beezus's tag-along younger sister, Ramona?
Well, she appears almost by accident. I needed an explanation for Beezus's unusual nickname. When I was about 6 years old, I did know a girl and a little sister. The little sister called her big sister Beezus. But I have only one memory of the two girls. They were cutting through our yard on a trip home from the grocery store, and the little sister was licking a cube of butter as if it were an ice cream cone. But somehow, in my imagination, the character began to grow until she had books of her own.
I think all readers of your books love Ramona and all the characters, and in fact, I think that the children of the United States have sort of voted you their president almost. They have voted so many awards for you. You had Ribsy, which won awards in Vermont and Hawaii, and Henry and the Paper Route won the Pacific Northwest Prize, which is voted on by children. And very recently, I think April 6th, Ramona the Brave won the Mark Twain Award in Missouri.
Yes.
That's right. Why do you think people love your characters so much, or your books so much?
Well, children often tell me they like my books because they are funny and sad, because they can feel like the characters or feel that they are present when the story is taking place. They like my books because they can understand them. So many children say they can't understand books they find in the library. And in the last few years, there's another reason has been given. They say they like my books because there's caring in them.
Oh, I like that.
It's a very recent development. It makes me wonder.
Makes you feel some satisfaction from this tremendous outpouring. I want to cite that librarians have not forgotten you either. In 1975, you were one of only 5 U.S. children's authors and illustrators ever to receive from the American Library Association this Laura Ingalls Wilder Award. It's given only every 5 years. What does the tie-in between this Valentine and the Wilder Award?
Oh, this Valentine was made to congratulate me for winning the award. It was made by the children in the Juan Cabrillo School in Seaside, California.
You know, I'd like to ask, one of my favorites is, I might add to this list of honors and awards, the book Ramona and Her Father was the 1978 Newbery Honor Award winner. What was the theme of that book? It is one of my favorites, but I'd like to ask you something like that.
When I write a book, I don't intend any theme. I begin with a character and an incident and let the story unfold. I feel if I started with a theme that I might become a little didactic. I think the theme that unfolded in that book was the pressure on a family when the father loses his job.
Mm-hmm. How about Henry Huggins? Could you say something about that?
That's a little harder. I don't think children are much concerned with theme, and I'm not sure that in books for younger children you can separate theme from subject matter. Mm-hmm. My first impulse is to say that it is the relationship of a boy to his family, his school, and his neighborhood, but that is also the subject matter of the book.
Yeah.
Henry Huggins was your first book.
Yes.
And being a librarian, I realize how difficult it is for an unknown writer to get published. How did you first get published?
Well, I wrote Henry Huggins and sent it to a publisher.
It was that easy?
And it was that easy.
Well, that one and a number of your books, in fact, most of your books, have been illustrated by Louis Darling. And then after he died, I know Alan Tigreen, is that how he
Alan
said?
Tigreen.
Tigreen. Continued and got the same feeling for your characters. Is there anything you can say about the two illustrators?
Well, I think I've been exceptionally fortunate in my illustrators. Louis Darling and I worked very happily together for about 20 years until his death. I actually met him only once, but we exchanged a number of letters. It was not easy to find someone to take his place, someone who had the same light touch, but a different style. And I'm delighted with Alan Tigreen. I like his work very much.
Everything we've said so far indicates what I believe about your work, that it's mostly realistic fiction that you write for children. But you've written a couple of fantasies, The Mouse and the Motorcycle, and a sequel called Runaway Ralph. How did you come to write those two books?
I wrote The Mouse and the Motorcycle for my son. When he was in the 4th grade, he was disgusted with school, books, and reading. And I asked him what he would like to read about, thinking I could run up a book. And he said he wanted to read about motorcycles. And I asked his sister what she would like to read about, and she said, a nice little animal. And I put the whole thing out of my mind. And then while we were on vacation, our son was quite feverish in the middle of the night, and well, I wish we'd had Ralph to go out and find an aspirin tablet for us. A Runaway Ralph, the sequel, I wrote because so many little boys who didn't like to read did want to read another book about Ralph, and also because I had wanted to write about the camp that our children went to every summer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most of your books are for the what I call the intermediate child, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. But you did step into teenage novels with such books as 15 and The Luckiest Girl. Was there a special reason you did that too?
I started writing those books because I talked to some junior high school girls who had enjoyed my younger books, and they suggested that I write humorous books for their age. Mm-hmm. And so I tried it, and I found I enjoyed the change of pace.
Mm-hmm. You're a highly successful author, and any highly successful author tends to get translated. And I wondered, have any of your books been translated, or have any of them ever been, say, on television?
Yes, I think I have books in perhaps 10 foreign languages now. And the Henry Huggins books were a television series that ran for a year in Japan. I don't know how they produced it, whether it was with live actors or whether it was a cartoon program. And in the Scandinavian countries, the Henry Huggins stories were used in a 4-part television series.
Oh, but they were good.
How do you organize your writing? And that's a question I'd love to have asked of any writer.
I don't organize at all. When I first started writing, I felt very guilty about this. I had been taught in school to outline. I don't think this works with fiction, at least not for me. My notes on a story take not more than 1 page in a composition book. I do think about a book for a long time, usually several years, and in the case of Ramona the Pest, I thought for 15 years before I wrote a word.
My goodness.
I never begin at the beginning, or rarely. I begin with a character and an incident and let the story unfold. And this, to me, is the joy of writing, the surprise of what comes out of my imagination. I feel that writers have minds like scrap bags. We keep all these things that we can rummage around in and pull out a bit that's useful here and a bit there.
How about editing? Do you have an editor at William Morrow that helps out?
Yes, Connie Epstein. She is very helpful to me in that she never pressures me. She never gives me a deadline. She leaves me free to write whatever I want to write, and she publishes my books as I write them. I have very strong feelings that a book should be the work of one person's imagination. However, she gives me a marvelous security because I know that if I had made some terrible mistake or had a blind spot, she would catch it. And once my manuscript is sent in, she gives me a marvelous peace of mind because she makes the publication go so smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever take any courses in writing at all, or just practice yourself?
No, I've never had a course in writing outside of school assignments, which I always enjoyed and felt we did not have nearly enough of. I did, however, major in English literature, and I think that a course in the history of the English novel has been very helpful. Also, I had a storytelling course in library school, which was very valuable. But I have not studied writing, and in fact, Henry Huggins was my first attempt at writing outside of a school assignment.
Did you always plan a first book about a boy?
Oh, no, of course not. I was going to write the usual first novel about the sensitive girl who wanted to write. And I was quite surprised when I found myself writing about a boy. And of course, the incidents in Henry Huggins are incidents that I had observed over a period of many years. And when the book was so promptly accepted, I was a little shocked. And I went right to the library and looked up 8-year-olds in Gesell and found that Henry was psychologically sound.
That's very good. I know you said that your school librarian had some influence on making you feel you could be a writer. Was she the main person to give you the belief?
She gave me the, I guess she put the idea of writing for children in my mind. My mother, however, had wanted me to be a writer. I think she had wanted to be a writer herself. And I think I owe a lot to all the reading aloud that she did when I was growing up.
You have been experienced as a children's librarian in, you said it was Yakima, Washington. And I wonder, the fact that you worked with children as a librarian and knew children's books from working in a library, do you think this helped you in writing for children yourself?
Oh, I think it was invaluable. I think my weekly story hour, in which I told folk tales and fairy tales, was my real training ground for writing for younger children. Also, working with the children of Yakima confirmed my own childhood feelings that there weren't enough funny stories in the library, particularly not enough funny stories about real American children. I remember one boy who wanted a funny story, and I gave him a book of folk tales, which I considered humorous. And he said, "Oh, I don't want to read about kings and things like that. I want to read about human beings."
Do you have advice that you would give to parents with children who have reading problems?
Well, yes, I think they should turn off the television and set an example for their children by reading themselves. I grew up in a family where adults read. It was the natural thing to do.
Sure.
I also feel that they should do the same thing my mother did. She read aloud books at my intellectual level or even beyond, because she read to both my father and me. But at the period when I was resisting reading, she also kept around the house a changing supply of books from the public library that were at my reading level. And eventually there came a day when I picked up the book and discovered that I was reading and enjoying what I read. And she also had a sneaky habit when I was a little older of reading aloud the first chapter or two of a book, and then she never could find time to finish it.
Very
She
wise,
had me in a corner.
modern woman, right?
Yes.
Do you have advice that you've been asked to give to would-be writers?
Oh, every mail brings letters asking for tips on writing.
Sure.
I don't think there really is such a thing. My advice really can be summed up in 4 words: observe, listen, read, and write. And I think listening is very important, because would-be writers so often tell me that they can't write dialogue. And I think it's because they have never trained themselves to listen to the way people talk.
When you do write at home, is there anyone who actually previews your manuscripts?
When I wrote my first book, I was a little insecure, and I have a friend who knows a great deal about children's books and has a rather sardonic view of them. And she read my first manuscript. Since then, I do not have anyone preview my books. I feel that authors who do this sometimes confuse themselves. They try to take advice of too many people. And I certainly would not try out my stories on children, because I think children are conditioned to please adults, and they would say they liked a book because they felt they should say they liked it. However, my husband reads my books. He's a marvelous speller. And my daughter reads them because she's interested. My son catches up with them sometime after they have been published. If I use something from my own children's experience, I do have them read that part of the story because I wouldn't want them to be embarrassed or to object. But so far, they have not objected to anything.
They, I would imagine, are marvelous children. And are they still in school? Or?
They are marvelous children. We're very happy with our children. No, well, our daughter is in school. She is at Stanford University working for her master's in music. Our son is working for a sporting goods store to support his running. He is a world-class runner. And that's the important thing in his life right now.
And at least in your home, you didn't try to pattern those two twins. They were free to flower in their own ways.
I'm always amused at books that say you should treat twins as individuals because they were individuals from the day they were born. They're quite opposite.
Absolutely.
The boy is outgoing, the girl is introspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm speaking now as a librarian, and I think one of the first questions we always ask is, what did you read as a child? Books that you liked?
I was an avid reader of almost anything in the library that was fiction. Nonfiction I felt was for school. I read straight through fairy tales and then myths and legends. The books that there are two books that I read over and over. One, I think, is now out of print. It's called Dandelion Cottage by Carol Watson Rankin. And it was the closest to what I wanted to read most of all as a child. It was about a group of girls in a small town in Michigan playing together, and the story was told with humor and with affection. My other favorite was Downright Dincy by Carolyn Dale Snedeker. I think I liked it because she was rather stubborn and rebellious.
Thank you. Beverly Cleary is the author of 23 funny and sad books about ordinary children. Her low-key humor features Henry Huggins in Henry and Beezus, winning $50 worth of beauty shop treatments, including permanent waves, facials, and false eyelashes. Afterwards, to prove his masculinity, he eats some dog food. In her Newbery Honor book, Ramona and Her Father, she has Ramona, who wants to earn $1 million selling TV commercials, practice by telling her second-grade teacher she has pantyhose wrinkles. Sheer disaster. Incidentally, Ramona and Her Father is the 1980 U.S. Honor Book of the International Board of Books for Young People. That's fine recognition. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you.
I enjoyed this.
It's been fun.
Da da